So yesterday we learned about sole proprietorships and partnerships, and you typed something about in Canvas chat for the bell ringer. Hopefully you had time to complete the job stat assignment, looking at the occupational data in the table, and then in the EI chart, typing in 20 facts that you found interesting as you look through, and 10 interpretations on the right-hand side. The notes for today, we will look at corporations and other businesses. And so first, let's look at a corporation. This is the last of the three types of business organizations. The first is sole proprietorship, the second is partnership, the third are corporations. And it is a business that is a separate legal entity. Separate legal entity. Entity is entity. What that means is it's completely different from the person or persons that own it. In the case of a sole proprietorship partnership, the business and the persons are one and the same. But in this case, it is like an individual unto itself. So it can buy and sell property, enter into a contract, sue and be sued. It can do a lot of the things that individual people can do. In fact, corporations even have, for instance, freedom of expression. They're allowed to, for instance, especially through trade associations, contribute to lobbying and campaigns and things like that. 20% of all businesses are corporations. 20% of all businesses are corporations. But they produce 90% of the products. %90 of the products. Advantages include it is the easiest in raising capital, including the sale of stock. The easiest in the raising of capital, including the sale of stock. They also have typically the best management, which is hired by the board of directors. Management hired by the board of directors. How does one get on the board of directors? Well, they get a majority of votes from the shareholders. So everybody that owns stock gets to vote. One vote for each share they have. They choose the board of directors, and then the board of directors hires someone to be in charge of the company. They can be, but don't have to be, named something like chief executive officer, for instance, chief financial officer, chief organizational officer, and so on. Another advantage is limited liability. You only lose your original investment if something bad happens to the company. You only lose your original investment. So whatever you paid for the stock the first time when you bought it is what you lose. So you only lose the original investment. Unlimited life. Unlimited life. And that's because the corporation keeps on living even after the original owner dies. See that?
Yeah. I'll get around to it.
So, for instance, Walt Disney, whether or not he's dead or his head's frozen in some kind of cryogenic chamber, once he died, of course, the company continues to exist. So it has unlimited life. And that's because the shareholders, not just Walt Disney, are the owners of the company. The disadvantages are, first of all, that the corporate charter is the most difficult to obtain. It's obviously much more complicated to set up than a sole proprietorship or a partnership. Another disadvantage, besides being difficult to set up, is that investors, also known as the owners, have little to say in how the business is run. The only way they influence the company is the vote that you get for the board of directors. So if you only own one share of stock, you only get one vote. Another disadvantage would be that it pays a separate set of taxes. It has the rights of an individual, so therefore it owes taxes, just like an individual. But that also means they pay corporate taxes. Then they take all their money and divide it up if they choose to. They don't have to do this, and send it out to shareholders. These are known as dividends. And those people that receive them then have to pay taxes on the dividends. They're also subject to more regulation. Particularly through the Securities and Exchange Commission, or SEC as it's called. Securities and Exchange Commission. Now we're on the topic of stock. Let's just talk about that a little bit. So stock, of course, the shares, once again, are ownership. Preferred stock means that you don't get a vote, but you get your dividends first. So if you ever offered that option and you really have no intention of ever voting in a shareholder meeting, which most people don't, then you should go for the preferred stock. Common stock, though, is what has voting rights. So if you want to influence company policy, then you would want the common stock. Once again, most people don't care about that. The stock exchange is the place where shares are bought and sold. The most famous of these, of course, is the New York Stock Exchange, also known as NYSE, the New York Stock Exchange. They typically have what are called older, more stable companies, often called blue chips. Walmart and McDonald's typically still do well, even during a recession, for instance. They have slow, steady growth, but they are reliable. And then newer companies, typically in the United States, are on NASDAQ, NASDAQ. Newer companies, technology-based companies, and so on. NASDAQ. And of course, stock brokers are the ones that manage the buying and selling for individual people. You can find stockbrokers online. There are even ones that don't necessarily charge fees. So it's much easier than it used to be. And of course, the main goal is either to collect dividends or to eventually sell the stock for a higher price than what you bought it. When that occurs, it's known as a capital gain. So you've made a profit. But you also have to pay taxes on capital gains. Stock can grow in value and eventually split. What that means is that the number of shares doubles and the price is split in half. That helps lower the value, making it more enticing to purchase in the future. So if you had 25 shares at $100 and they split the stock, you would now have 50 shares at $50. So this is done to keep the stock affordable. Some criticisms of corporations are that stockholders and management don't always agree. Management is often engaged in self-interest, obviously. Why wouldn't they be? but they might be more interested in boosting their possible bonus that they get or their salaries. They, of course, know what's happening in the company before the stockholders. So if they know something bad's going to happen, they might be able to sell, for instance, in advance. So it is easy for management, of course, to also manipulate company records and value of stock. And going back in time, Adam Smith, one of the fathers of capitalist theory, he was very suspicious of earlier corporations for some of these very reasons. Lastly, I want to talk about other types of businesses that you might hear about. Two other ones that you might hear about are limited liability partnerships and S-corps, which is just spelled S-CORPS. These offer more control for owners without the extra taxes. But that gets into some complications. Specific types of businesses are more fit for those. And the average person usually doesn't get involved with those. Then the other thing that I want to mention are franchises. Franchises. This is when a business owner purchases the right to use a brand name or trademark. Business owner purchases the right to use a brand name or trademark.
Like Sony and Spider-Man.
I was thinking more of, you own a local Dairy Queen. But anyway, some of the good reasons why franchises exist is, of course, you get the name recognition, employee training. Some say it's easier to start up because you don't have to come up with any ideas. It's all probably right there.
Yeah, doesn't the Coca-Cola company control like several other soft drinks?
Yes, absolutely. Most of them are dominated by Pepsi and Coca-Cola. You also have access to a range of products, advertising. People are familiar with the products. For the parent company, they get to broaden their base of sales. They themselves have less staff on the ground because it's actually the smaller businesses that end up hiring the people. So less staff on the ground. And they also distribute costs because now they don't have to take care of all these facilities themselves. The bad are that the parent company often has a lot of control. The parent company has a lot of control. Another bad thing are inventory purchases. They might make you purchase hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment to sell. Like if you own a franchise dealership for a type of chainsaw or lawn tractor, they're going to make you, of course, keep so many items on your shelves or out in your yard. and that you're going to have to purchase that up front. There's also little room for innovation. On one hand, you have all these ideas already made for you, but then again, you don't get to make a lot of changes yourself. For some people, of course, it's also too much capital to start up, so too much cash up front. So many people can't afford to do it. There are some franchises you need over $1 million just to start up your own local version. And then from the mother company perspective, they have less control over the system. In recent years, some of the parent companies have tried to rein that in. KFC and Taco Bell are two examples. One of the reasons why we don't have one here in town anymore is because both of those are owned by one company. They wanted all their stores to be remodeled in the same way. And even though the KFC and Taco Bell that were here in town did really well, they didn't have enough cash on hand to make those renovations. And so they just said, well, we'll give up our franchise license, and they closed. So those are all the notes on the different types of business organizations. For the remainder of the period, finish the job stats assignment if you haven't already. And of course, there's the reading. Make sure you get that turned in. The due date technically isn't until tomorrow. Don't forget to take the reading and vocab quiz for unit number 4. And of course, next week will be a test and review week.